My thoughts on environment variables. There's a row issue. There's some code. I'm Michael Milewski, Ceramic. Check me out in all those places. So we're all Rails developers, or at least tried it at some point. We did Rails new, and life is good. You've got Ruby on Rails running, right? So all of a sudden, you've got some magic values. You've got something in your code, and you're like, that 42, that's very special, but it's magic value. So what do you do with it? You put it into a constant, and what does that mean? Life is good, right? So you've extracted it, you've put it somewhere else. It's a good thing. But then all of a sudden you're going, well, that was on my developer machine, but when it went up to CI, it was slightly different. And then when it was in production, it was different again. Oh, we're struggling with our sizing here. Let's go wider. Oh, look at that. So you start going, I've got a different value for each one of them. What am I going to do? And you're going, I'm going to configure them for dev, for test, and for prod. And you've got these locations in config environments development, in here, and in the test one. And in this case, for example, you may have a different email delivery, right? Makes sense in development. I don't want to be sending emails to customers. I want to catch them and see what they look like. In test, I probably want some kind of test adapter just to pick them up. And in production, I probably want to have some kind of secret API key that connects to my third party that does that for me. Life is good. Yeah, you split it all out. Perfect. You have a second production. Who here has a second production? Pre-production, user acceptance testing, staging, release, sandbox, some Heroku deploy disaster recovery thing, right? We all do. No worries. We've got config environments for development, for test. We can just copy production to staging and release and UAT. Who's done this? Right. And if you haven't done this, go and LS your config environments thing and you see how many you've got there, right? Do not do this. Development, test, and production should be your only, they shouldn't have been called environments. They should have been called modes, right? So Rails runs in different modes. In development, you want your code to automatically reload. You want your SQL to be displayed what query was made. You want your caches to be blown away, etc. In test, you want a specific database that's slightly different and certain adapters that work differently. And in production, you want to get rid of all those niceties and you just want quick, fast deploy. Whether it's the staging production or the release production or the user acceptance testing production, they should be all the same. But you haven't seen this presentation. So life is good, right? You've got a couple of these things and you throw in your environment variables there and everything's good. But all of a sudden, it's not just your magic numbers. You've got some S3 secrets, a database credential, maybe a third-party URL that's super secret, and an API key. What do you do? The files are there, right? Don't you just put them in there, your API keys and your secrets, put them in development, production, staging, release, UAT, and you commit it to Git. You committed secrets to Git. Like, that's a fireable offense, isn't it? To some. I hear even talking about it is a fireable offense. You haven't seen this presentation, so life is good. It's a private repo. Who's going to see it, right? Life's good. Don't do this. But more importantly, don't create processes that can lead to developers to committing secrets to Git. In fact, we always don't blame the individual, blame the process, right? So we are creating a process here where we're saying, hey, we've got all these environment things and all these constants or environment variables, and we just push it to Git because it's private. Have you seen this? Who here has credentials that shouldn't be in their Git repos? Yeah, we all do. And then you go off and read about 12-factor apps. And part 3, configuration. Store the configuration in the environment, 12factor.net. And you read section 3, and it says, apps sometimes store more config as constants in the code. This is a violation of 12-factor. So you go and rewrite all your configurations not to have all of that, then you're back to one production. No, you don't. You don't have time. Okay, so let's have a quick recap. What have we talked about? We've talked about some ideas of constants that may change between different environments. And some of these are settings, right? Some of these are what would be called internal settings, like your framework. Maybe you've got number of Puma kind of workers or Sidekick workers, or maybe you've got application settings like whether email is enabled, or maybe your default locale. None of those are really secret, like doesn't really matter, but they may change between environments or between deployments. And then you've got secrets, right? And they're usually secrets to external things. So you've got connection to your Redis cache or your database, an API gateway, S3 to upload images, etc. And then, because we need demos, there is this other thing called environments, which I've mentioned a number of times. So let's have a quick demo of what environment is. So right now, if I set and grep for demo, it says there's nothing there. If I print env and grep for demo, it says there's nothing there. And if I export well, I don't know. If I export demo this, Michael, so the first one shows, I think, what's set on this current environment. The second one prints the environment. But I don't want to show you my whole environment because I may actually have some secrets in there. So I then pipe it, that's that vertical pipe character, through grep, which is a way of searching, and I'm searching for something with all caps demo. And it says, I don't have anything all caps demo, but on the third line, I've gone, let's export demo this to be Michael. So if I now run printenv and look for demo, it says demo this is there, right? And if I look at the set thing, it's also there, right? So there are two ways of dumping environment variables, but it's an environment, so it's only this running shell. So if I copy this and I open a new shell, a new environment, same location, same everything else, it's still logged in as me, but I do that, it disappears because it's not there. So it's ephemeral, right? The environment is only for the duration of a running process. So it's only when that terminal is running that it exists, and as soon as it dies, or as soon as you start another one, it disappears. So we've got a general idea of settings. There's some internal ones, secrets, external ones, environments, so this ephemeral thing. How does this all work together? Well, DevOps, we all have DevOps. They actually did read the 12-factor app thing, and they said, hey, let's move all of our production secrets into environment variables because they're ephemeral. So only when my Kubernetes, or Docker container fire up do I inject those environment variables like I did through some script magic or whatever. And then all I need to do is get that environment variable, and it means I don't have to commit them. So all of a sudden, all of these modes, but all the copies that we've got of them, we've got rid of all the secrets and put environment variables in there because that's the better way to do it. No secrets in Git. Woohoo! Party on. But you can't run your app. Because when you do bin Rails S, it says, hey, the API secret, key error, not found. Can't find these keys. And I don't know about you. The going thing is it's probably about 60 keys for most Rails app out there just to run them. I think ours at the moment is about 85. So there's 85 environment variables that you need to have defined at some place to run certain bits and pieces. So you install .env-gem, you bundle, add .env Rails, and all of a sudden you have a .env.development file in there. And you put in your API secret into that file. And again, you have committed that instead. So you've created a process which allows you to commit secrets into Git. It's not in the actual file, it's in this other file, it's a dot file, it's got to be hidden, right? But, it's private Git, who cares, right? So what are the alternatives? Well, there's two kind of things I want to kind of generally touch upon. These are thoughts. This is not the final thing. Ephemeral environments and encrypted secrets, right? So we saw an ephemeral environment, but potentially there's some working issues with that. And encrypted secrets, what are they? So who has heard of Rails credentials? Okay, so I think since Rails 5 or 6, they've decided to say this committing credentials to Git is problematic and we haven't created a better process, so why don't we create one? So what they've done is said, right, let's encrypt that. And then there's a bunch of other ones. So Shopify has eJSON, which is encrypted JSON. Mozilla has SOPs. Ansible has its Vault. And they're all kind of slightly different answers to the same problem. Obviously, Rails credentials come built in Rails, which means that's great in Rails, but it might be slightly problematic if not everything you do is Rails. Demo time. Cool. So I've built an app Woo! Rails new. And I've got a whole bunch of things that no one's going to understand. So let's see if we can try and understand some of it. I'm going to, what do I do with this? Too many things. Okay, so this is the project. And when I run this, I see there's no Rails credentials, right? It's like, oh, okay, that's cool. There's none in there right now. I have all sorts of environment variables, and the first thing I talk to you about is this .env stuff. And these are the ones actually that are coming up, right? So I have a .env visible and a .env secret. So imagine that's a thing that's a setting and a thing that's a secret setting. And these are currently coming up. Where do they come from? It says it's set in the .env file. So if I cat the .env file, we see there are four secrets in here, .env visible secret and overwritten visible and overwritten secret. And they at the end they say these are all set in .env. And if I do a git log on .env, it says yes, Michael did commit those because he needed them so that this app runs because they needed there. But as we can see, these overwritten ones here are in .env.development because this .env gem is so clever. You can have like your default environments and then your development environments. So you can overwrite them. So I can cat.env development and I go, oh yeah, right. These are just the overwritten ones are overwritten and it says .env development. So in my app, these actually come from .env development. And we go, okay, well, the problem we're saying here is they're on the disk, they're on the file system, they're in your Git repo. If anyone goes through your Git repo, they have access to those keys. If anyone can read a file on your system, they have access to those keys. But just to kind of dwell on a little bit, I think there's a demo with .env, right? So it says, right, do this. Okay, so we've shown you all of those. And then if I cat the .env local, it says it doesn't exist, right? Because that's maybe one that's so secret, you don't even want to commit that to Git. So you maybe have a way of generating that, or you copy it, you put it in Slack or whatever, you get the contents of it, you then cat it and you go, oh yeah, these are the super secret ones where they're overwritten by the .env local, because this is my actual test account to the API. So if I reload this, rather than this being, let's actually create just a new page. If I reload this, we should find out that these ones now are coming from .env development, where they are from .env development. Oh yeah, I have to restart, right? Bin Rails restart. Who knows this command? Anywhere you run it, it will find the Rails project and restart it, which if it worked, if I refresh the one on the right, it says this come from env local, whereas this one's still env development. If I refresh this one, you see these have come from env local. So that's what the .env does. Who here uses .env? Right, so the problem here is we have credentials or a process of storing credentials. They are only development ones in our private Git, but they're on our disk and they're in our repos. And if you wrote some crazy code like this, and somebody did, then all of a sudden your Rails app could show me those files, right? Those credentials, because they're on disk. They're on disk, whether they're on your machine or running in Kubernetes or running on a Docker container, or somebody else is scanning your disk or whatever it is, or some hacker's got your disk, then they can get it. Whereas the ephemeral environment, they can't, because unless it's running and unless they're in it, it doesn't actually exist anywhere. This does. So that's where we're trying to get away from that. So one of the ways of getting away with that is Rails credentials. What do Rails credentials look like? They usually sit in something like config credentials YAML. So let's use the same technique here. I can access that and see it. And does anyone know what that credential is? Nobody, because it's very hard to try and work that out. Now, the typical way is to have a master key. Master key does not exist on this current project. The master key is not there, hence the Rails credentials cannot be read, cannot be decrypted. You need the master key to do that. Let's do that. So make demo Rails credentials. I have no idea what this will tell me. oh, okay, this is a really cool demo, and you can grab this repo if you want to see how these make files get put together. This says, I want to do some Rails credential stuff, but you're currently not signed into OP. Who uses 1Password? Who uses Bitwarden? I believe both have a command line interface. 1Password's one is called OP. And this one's telling me you need to be signed into 1Password with that command in red. And if you are, then this command will run. Also, if you don't have access to my 1Password credential thing, it shows you what the config master key is. In this case, I've made it numbers, letters, pretty simple. But to show you how this example works, I'll do this. And it says, oh, enter the password for michaelmilewski.mable.com.au. So and supposedly it's successful. I think there are some OP commands I can do, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to run that command again. And sure enough, the second time the command actually said, yeah, it's fine. It's reading from 1Password, my private envar master key notes, which is literally just a note in my 1Password. And it's putting that into my config master key. In this case, it spits it out because this is a demonstration. And then it shows me that if I ran that bit of code, it actually decodes the environment variables. So those environment variables now exist because the master key is placed in here, which means if we do the restart trick and we go back to the two browsers, if I refresh this one, these Rails credentials null should now be able to be read. Boom, because those secrets are there. So this is a slightly better option because the secrets are stored in Git but encrypted. And the only thing you need is one thing, which is that master key, which if you do something like this, you could on startup pull from something like 1Password or Bitwarden or somewhere else and put it in there. But this Rails credential is a master key that is still sitting on your disk. So if I get your credentials and if I get this master key, you're not much better off because with that key, the actual decryption is known and you can decrypt that. So it's slightly better, but it's still not the whole way. I've got a few things here, so let's just show you what some of them look like. eJSON, there's a whole script here if you want to play around with eJSON and do it. But the key here is that in this case, I can decrypt a file like this, or in this case, actually, I just want to make these environment variables available in my environment. So if I run this, as you can see, we currently don't have any Ansible environment variables. If I run this, why did that work? Right. Clever. This worked because there are two ways of doing this. Let me just, set, what was it? Grep for Ansible. No, it just did not work. All right. Should have worked. eJSON. Let's. All right, I haven't got time for things that don't work. I'm doing eJSON or Ansible? No, I'm doing the eJSON one, right? So I was actually searching for the wrong thing. eJSON. Yes, okay, sorry. They are there. It just worked. It didn't ask me for a password because Ansible has this thing where it can ask you for a password, but it can also have a recommended place to put your secret key. So what does eJSON look like? So in here, if I look at my eJSON secrets, it's kind of cool. It's a JSON file where you have a public key. So that's that big number at the top. That's the public key. Anything that starts with an underscore is an environment variable that will not be encrypted. Any environment variable that doesn't start with an underscore is encrypted. So it means you know what the variables are, but you don't know what the values are, and you know what key you need. So you just say, hey, I've got the public key 7BAA, show me the private key for that. Of course, that's great because we've got that. It's right here. So if I had that, I could decrypt that. Again, often that key ends up sitting on your machine. Not perfect, not quite there yet. Let's go. Final. So we've added these. If we now stop the app here and run it in this environment, because this environment's got the Ansible secrets, Rails. So now that it's running in here, if I refresh this, eJSON, I'm mixing them up. The eJSON secrets should appear. They do. And obviously those Rails credentials from before. But the ones we haven't seen are the Ansible ones yet. This is the final thing. So if I go to the Ansible ones, they sit in here. And this doesn't give you much of a hint what's there, right? I have no idea if it's 1 key, 100 keys, it's a poem or what. It just says this is an Ansible vault, AES-256 encrypted. Okay, that's cool. Let's decrypt it. So clearly what we do is make, and it says make demo Ansible vault. And it says, right, this is how you do it. You source this script and you run it against prod, and that will decrypt your prod things if you've got the password of password. And you go, okay, so presumably I do not have these Ansible variables. I do not. And if I now source that, and it asks me for a password, and this is the bit where it's not on my disk. I mean, potentially I could be there, but eJSON kind of pushes for it. Ansible pushes not to have it there. It's probably in my 1Password, so which I kind of open it up and put it in, password in this case. And if I run my Ansible, I've got my Ansible environment variables there, which means if I kill this Rails session and now run my Rails in here and refresh, we are expecting these Ansible vault things to appear. And yeah, the eJSON ones encrypted have disappeared because they were in another session, but the Ansible ones have appeared. And the cool thing here is, at this point, all I have is that. Not much to know. But you might be thinking, well, okay, Michael, every time you run an environment, you need to create those, you need to log in, right? You need to log into every single terminal. Okay, let's see what the solution for that is. In here, we've said, right, we've talked about most of those. SOPs is another one. It's very good. It has timeouts. It uses, it connects to AWS and actually gets AWS credentials. It's worth looking at if any of this interests you. As I said, a number of them store a key on the disk, but we want to get away from that. And then the shared environment, one way of doing this is through tmux. And one of the very few reasons I do not run a standard terminal is for tmux. So I'm all about everything standard, standard, standard. And iTerm happens to support tmux better than a normal terminal. So let's have a look at what that means.
Anything that has the iTerm tmux integration thing in it. Like,
as good as.
Yeah, as good as.
Yeah. So in this case, you run make tmux. No, everything starts with demo tmux. And what this is going to do is this is going to run a script which will say, go and create a terminal emulator and run that and create 3 windows in it. Boom, it's created 3 windows. So I've got, 4 for the price of 3. All right. It's got 4 windows, and I think I jumped at this too early, right? Ansible. Yeah, I don't have any environment variables. So in this case, I kill it and down. Right, so I first want my Ansible vault thing. So I want to make sure that the first thing I do on a Monday is log in. And once I've logged in, I want to make that tmux, not the tmux down there, demo of tmux, demo tmux. And all of a sudden, the 4 windows that got created took on the environment that I signed in as. So in here, I have my secrets, 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 secrets. And if I create a new window and look for Ansible, they're there. In fact, any one of these windows now joins the whole session. So now we're at the point where we have an encrypted file, we don't have a key locally, and we have a good, reasonably good user experience because we say the only time I have the environment variables is when I'm running the environment. And as soon as I kill that, you've got no chance, unless you can unlock my 1Password and get my password into this. So with that, go back to the slides because they're so important. If you want to manage secrets in a good way, because sometimes it's complicated as to what the environment variable is, how you read it in, how you make sure it's there, how you reconfigure it differently in different environments. Anyway, config, give that a go. Why should you care? I don't know. These are the things I didn't finish, but I will at some point. Oh, right. Why should you care? Right. So the key way you should care is be interested in how your security works and how you could break it and how other things change. So one of the things we were looking at very recently is Kubernetes. And if you look at the default Kubernetes setup with AWS, one of the recommendations is to use the secret store CSI driver. Sounds super amazing, and it's a way of getting secrets into your Kubernetes. Do you know what it does? It's all of your secrets and puts it on a file on your system. So anyone who's using that will then get a file on their system with all their secrets. Now, I'm not saying it's the end of the world. I still need to get onto that machine, but it is a file that's just there ready to be read, plain text, every single secret. In summary, learn how things work, be willing to question things, don't store encrypted secrets on disk. There's a working demo if you want to see it. I'll post the QR code, but it doesn't work in here. So what I need to do is, clearly I've got like a make script for this. Make QR, no, make slides, image. Woo! Yeah. Oh, it's too big, man. All right. Yeah. So if you go there, that's where you can get this whole code demo. Everything works. The only thing you won't be able to do is use my 1Password because you won't be able to access it, but you can replace it with yours. Thank you very much for your time. Do all those things. And any last questions? Yes, at the back.
In the Ansible demo, where did those environment variables come from? Were they decrypted from that vault file?
Yes.
So the vault file's encrypted in some key that is pulled out of an Ansible server somewhere when you run it.
No, not a server. There's no network required. So I have a env secrets file, which is that horrendous bit of Ansible, and then I have a bin secrets edit for all intents and purposes. Imagine this is like an edit, like a Rails credentials edit. In this case, I give it a name, which is prod, because it allows me to have numerous directories. I do that. It asks me for the password, and it shows me the contents of that file, right? And if I say, oh, I want to also echo, I don't know if echo works. Hello, Rails in there, right, quit. Then what's happened is that file is now edited, which means git status. I'll have a diff on that secrets file. If I look at that, I go git diff. It says there's a diff, right? So that edit that I've done is now there. So basically, it's you know the password, it's encrypted. You lose the password, you're screwed.
So is it just encrypted with that password?
Yep. Okay. And there's some scripts around that I've got here that would allow you to read, edit, and load, which is very similar to what Rails credentials do. But this means this is slightly more portable than Rails credentials, because anywhere you run anything, you can easily get Ansible, or Ansible actually comes on things like GitHub runners, etc. So you don't even have to install. There's another question somewhere here. Yeah.
So protects this strategy is protect against being able to read a file on disk. But if someone can read a file on disk, you can kind of cycle ready that point. They can read your cookies or whatever else to get access to your accounts.
Yes. So yes, but everything starts somewhere, right? So the ability to read a file on disk is much easier than access a running server. As I showed you, I showed you a controller that would actually read any file. And funnily enough, with that controller running on that machine, you can actually read my secrets from my workplace. You just do ... go up and down the directory. You can go get my Bitcoin, right? That server right now is misconfigured in such a way you can read any file on my system. And I'm on the Wi-Fi. All right. So that's, that's the slightly easier access point. And if you look back at a lot of hacks It's often where somebody's misconfigured something, put something where it wasn't meant to be, left something in Git history, put it on a server that they thought no one had access to, but it was a dev server, and all of a sudden somebody did have access to it, right? Isn't that the way the Optus breach happened, where they were pushing stuff and it was on a staging server that everyone thought was like no one had access to, but actually people had access to it, and then they had a dump of data on there that was actually production data.
I want to know how that really
Process. Somebody created a process where it was easier to leave things be rather than not do them in the first place. And the issue I have here is I work in these places and people say, hey, I've got this super duper secret. And they go, I say, well, don't put it in. Oh, but every developer needs it, right? I have Sidekick credentials. I need to give them to every developer. So currently in my code base, it's in 3 different places. 3? Yeah, 3 different places. I think 4 is better. It's in 4 different places, right? Because there's 2 Docker builds and there's some CI build, and they put them everywhere. I was just like, you don't need to do this. There are ways of creating gem credentials that aren't in your gem log file, in your Docker build file, in some other file, and whatever else. And worst case, just encrypt them and create that, because sooner or later somebody's going to need to put something there. And if you don't change it, and the other thing is, let's understand, 50% of developers have been in this industry for less than 5 years, right? That's just what IT is. As people get older, there's less of them, and more young people come in, and then that average becomes around the 5-year mark. And they don't necessarily have that expertise. So it may not even be this code base. They'll have learnt this from you and going, yeah, I .env for everything, right? I've been on people's private enterprise-y kind of things, because then they said, well, that's what we do, isn't it? I said, no. I said, well, that's what I've done in every job. I said, well, that doesn't make it right. All right, enough of my high horse. Get me off here. Thank you for all those online.